Hello everyone, it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you here, particularly Mr. Watnik from the US Embassy, and all our writers from distances that are easy to imagine, but sometimes quite interesting to engage with. And distance, I think, is a metaphor for something perhaps a little bit more critical that we are confronted with today, and that is in terms of serious engagement with peoples from different cultures and different climates. I think climate change is something that the world has embraced in a rather interesting way, and writers have been engaged with climate change from day one. But in terms of the cultural interfacing that is becoming more and more urgent, I think writers have been perhaps a little diffident. I grew up at a time when political appropriateness was just coming into being. And I remember the heady days of the 70s, which were callous and quite wild and free. But as we moved into the 80s and 90s, certainly America, I think, was the nation that most impressively taught the world something called PC, political correctness. And I don't know whether I'm right or wrong about this, but I remember my time in Iowa. We were very, very impressed by Chuck Blaze, who was there then as the director of the writing program, telling us that in America it is important that all of us from other climates and other countries pay attention to something called PC, political correctness. This has had all kinds of ramifications, but one of the more interesting ones, I think, has been sometimes a reluctance on the part of writers in one nation to talk robustly, perhaps, about people in another nation, for fear that there might be all kinds of responses and reactions. And because people are sensitive, because national identities, national cultures, national values are very, very precious, I think a lot of writers became a little bit cowed. And I remember the excitement we had in 1997, that's when I was the visiting writer at the Iowa workshop. A lot of the debate and discussion surrounded precisely how far can writers go, even just in the imagination. And is it always necessary to have a fictional landscape rather than a real landscape, or a landscape that is quite readily recognizable but still shrouded in this fictional kind of label? And I remember that many of the writers who were there from 30 over countries were more and more getting to be in a polarized kind of way. And it was interesting. The writers from Latin America, Africa, Asia generally tended to be ones that were quite vociferous about saying that we do need to take a stand and we do need to be ideological about this and we do need to engage with each other. And the writers from Europe and America and Canada tended to be a little bit more, should I say, cautious about this. And over private, sort of dinners and teas and coffee sessions, they would sometimes tease and, sort of rip and say, but hey, thanks, but, rip and say, hey, while this is all very good, but there's been a lot of bashing going on about Europe and America being cultures that tend to be known and looked up by a lot of the world, but also setting the pace and sometimes the trend in sort of passions. And there are, of course, literary passions. And so they said that perhaps it is time for you guys to take over and do more. And I think we've actually seen since the mid-90s, especially, a lot of work, especially in America, by probably landed immigrants or writers that just visit America over a sustained period, and therefore engaging with it, coming from all parts of the world, China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, even Malaysia, and all that. So I think it's a very, very interesting moment now, as we have gone through one or two, what my grandmother would have described, one or two dark moments in recent history. It is more and more interesting now to understand that this push, this intense urgency to communicate and to talk with each other across what was perceived to be a wide gulf heretofore, now becoming almost so instantaneously recognizable as something that's just next second or next minute or next centimeter rather than a mile or thousands of miles. That change, I think, has been so important that writers' festivals like this current one that we are officiating today become, I think, absolutely necessary. I also think that writers do give and do lend a nation a distinct feature, a distinct characteristic, and a distinct capacity to try to understand not only the world around them, but also their own world. And I think here America again has set a very good example, because in some ways it's a new country, it's a new nation in terms of, say, you think African history, Asian history, European history. But in terms of writing in English, in a very robust way that reaches out. I know Shakespeare reached out to Italy and perhaps even to the Moors, the Persians and all that. But beyond that, I think European literature tended to be, for the most part, fairly self-contained. And it was the adventurous spirit of the early American writers, and also some of the early European writers, that began to set the pace for this intercultural engagement. And for me, this is very, very important. And one of my sort of main agendas has always been that the more I can bring writers together, and the more I can bring people who read together, the more I think I would have in some ways realized a modicum of the overall need for people to get to know each other better. So it is precisely for that that I'm very, very happy that we have today with us all of you, and also our writers who have come from afar to share with us their perceptions, their perspectives. And events are happening every day, every evening. And the little brochure that you have over there shows you the detailed program. Okay, I will stop there, and I will now take privilege and invite Mr. Eric Watnik, our U.S. Public Affairs boss, to come and say a few words to us by way of opening the American Writers Festival 2013 here at SMU. Eric.
Hi everybody, it's a pleasure to be here again. This is my third American Writers Festival, and I think actually my first one was one of my first speeches after I arrived in Singapore. So sadly this will be my last one. I will be moving on before the next one takes place, but I'm certain Kirpal will be as convincing as always to make sure that this continues. I want to thank, first of all, the writers for coming. Maurice, thank you. Moira, thank you. Shawn, thank you. Rodger, also there, and Ravi, thank you all. I've only just gotten a chance to meet you all today and yesterday. I hope we're able to have a few more conversations before I leave. And of course, thank you to Kirpal, who is the mastermind of all of this, and make sure that he continues to get our support by putting together such an interesting program. I will tell you that in many places on earth, doing what I do, promoting brand America to foreign audiences is not such an easy task. Why is it the Americans are laughing harder than everybody else? And one of the things that I need to do is overcome stereotypes of who we are. And that actually is fairly difficult here in Singapore, where people have a real mental image of who we are as Americans, maybe from a quick trip there, or maybe even studying for a short time in the United States. And it's not always what people expect. And I think the writers that we have here today reflect a really unique cross-section of who we are as Americans. They all bring something to, some experience to us that is uniquely American and unique to who they are. I fear, as the face of America, that I am what people expect, a white guy from California. Let's face it. It's hard to sell brand America when I am the stereotype. It's nice to have other faces and other demographics coming to us to talk about your experience as Americans, and I hope you'll spend some time doing that. I think one of the other things that seems to surprise Singaporeans is just how much latitude we get as Americans to be able to say what's on our minds. So I hope you'll talk about that experience as well while you're here, and share pushing the boundaries a little bit, and what that means to you in your experience as Americans, especially Americans visiting foreign lands. I hope you'll find some time to talk, especially with the students, about what that means to you and what our rights as Americans mean to you. I don't want to take a whole lot of time, so with that I will hand it back to Kirpal and next. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I really have to say that Eric has been a very, very strong pillar of support over the last 3 years. And I don't know whether, non-Americans have the right to write to the American administration to say, why is it every time that just when we get to be a very happy working relationship with one of your guys, you're suddenly taking away from us. And this happens, with people all over the diplomatic world in some ways, but it's a constraint. But the positive side is that the successors always know what the predecessor has done, and therefore that is already a step in the door. And this is very, very good. I now want to invite Eric to hand out just little tokens of our appreciation to the 5 writers. Could I call upon first our lady Moira Crone.
You want to be in the photo? You should be in the photo.
Thank you. And next, our senior writer, Maurice Lee. Thanks. Next, our equally senior writer, but a little bit younger, Shawn Wong. And then Rodger Kamenetz. Him. And last but not the least, as they say, Ravi Shankar. He's got a hurt finger. Thank you. Thank you. Now that the festival has been launched for 2013, thanks to Eric, we are going to be listening with pleasure to 2 readings, one by Moira Crone and one by Shawn Wong. And I think, as they say, it's customary to invite the lady first, so Moira, could I please invite you to do your reading? Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank everyone who's brought me here. I'm just thrilled to be here on the other side of the world. And I want to thank Kirpal and Maurice, because he has a secret part in this, because he created a conference called the International Conference on Short Story English, which has been going on all over the world for many years. And that's where I met Kirpal, in a very hot Little Rock, Arkansas. At the Clinton Library, where there was a 55,000-foot picture of Clinton talking to us. Do you remember that? Yeah. So I've been told to read for 15 minutes, and I'll try to keep it at that. I'm mostly a American short story writer, Southern writer. But several years ago, I got the idea to write a work of speculative fiction, and I was encouraged by a lot of people, and I've become a science fiction writer, sort of through the back door, and it's been very interesting. I didn't know I'd written a science fiction novel until I finished it, and I wrote the letter to Ursula Le Guin, and I described the book to her, and she said, "If you don't call that science fiction writer, I won't have anything to do with you." Science fiction. So I did. I decided. So it's a novel set in New Orleans in the future, in the year 2132. New Orleans is underwater. I wrote this before Katrina. It's like Venice. And so the novel is partly about environment that's been compromised, and it's also about a society that has become a caste society, like New Orleans was in the 19th century. It's sort of reverted. The caste is now people who are on life extension, who are extremely wealthy, and they can live a very long time. And they're called the heirs, or the treated people. They've been treated. And the rest of the society are people who live normal lives, normal life cycle, and they're considered lowly. So it has a kind of quality of the haves and the have-nots. This society has many dystopian societies that have been written about have. The epigram of the novel is "Eternity is in love with the productions of time," which is a line from William Blake. First and last, Malcolm, I've called you in to tell you how things are, my guardian began, in that voice they all had, full of sizzle like a rattle. His eyes didn't blink, I noticed. I sat in front of him on a bench with a thick cushion and fat legs, my feet not touching the floor. It was his office in the old Audubon Fountain House on the islands of New Orleans. The lit sconces with half shades above our heads were giant fireflies to me. I asked him for help, maybe for strength. Could I be strong? I didn't know. This was the first time Lazarus had ever summoned me. I was 5 years old, and I was shivering. At dawn, the cook, Mary Lee, had awakened me with news of this meeting and said I had to go and get ready. Instead of breakfast, she had made me drink a tumbler full of something foamy and yellow, which tasted like chalk. Half an hour later, my stomach exploded. 15 runs to the bucket. She said that got rid of the worms. In the garden, she poured kerosene on my head, then a strange green oil. After, in the sunlight on the banks of the old river, she combed out my nits. Finally, she led me to a room with a large stainless steel tub on a pedestal. It was a shock. I was used to being hosed down. She scrubbed me with stinky pine soap, washed my hair and rinsed it twice, lifted me out in a fluffy towel. She gave me new clothes, which made me very proud, a collarless shirt, thin pants that fell past my knees. She'd set me down the hall to my guardian's office with my head still wet. Lazarus noticed my teeth were chattering. I trust your ablutions. They're not too taxing. I didn't know how to answer. That Mary Lee was gentle. He leaned back, and the slow, thick features of his padded face closed in. He was round-shouldered with a big head. His hands were small. I stared at him. I failed to speak. She praised you, said you were quite the little stoic, the silent type. He took a very long pause. My friend Ariel had told me, you always have to wait when you talk to them. They are slow on purpose to drive us crazy. So to begin, there are two kinds in the world, the lucky and the unlucky. The lucky have a trust. If you don't build one, you'll have a hard life, and it'll end like... He tried to snap his fingers, but he couldn't. His overskin was too slick for that. For some reason, he looked surprised. Do you know what I mean when I say end? Do you know about the unlucky? What happens to them? You were supposed to say, the unlucky do the so long goodbye. But the rough boys in the play yard chanted, they dribble down the drain. They suck the black. It was the most dirty, awful thing that could happen. I know was the first phrase I uttered, and it will never happen to me. Lazarus was pleased. Now we can dream, the wise men say, but we cannot observe eternity. So we shouldn't say never, but we can say not for a very long, very, very long. Never, I tossed in the head, which somehow I knew he'd like. That's the spirit. That's the promise of the reveal, which is so far being kept. You aren't supposed to tell our counts, but I'll do it. I'm approaching 200. Do you realize how long that is? He smiled and showed his bluish teeth. And this is all you have to know for now. There are two kinds in this world. Those who are certain they will not last, and those who have wonderful lives, and every reason to hope for eternity. Like me, we're heirs, or for slang, T's for treated. Now, we don't insult the unfortunates by calling them dirty low naturals or gnats or low downs or loans. We used our enclave names, freewheelers, Czech Manturians, Port Grammarsarians, and so forth. Why add to their misery with cruel epithets? I didn't know what epithets were. And those with hope like me are the treated ones who don't have to do that dirty, awful thing, at least not anytime soon. His laugh was a gush. We prefer to be called heirs. The only difference between gnats and heirs is the trust. To be an heir, you must be treated, and to be treated, you need a trust. Money. and it's best to start building one as soon as you can. His face widened. I brought you in to say you can begin today. The scouts from Celebration of Sins have picked you out. You have a role already. That's why we've cleaned you up. A marvelous opportunity. Don't let us down. Most of all, don't let yourself down. Just outside, footsteps. Lazarus looked up. Come in. When the door opened, a large man was standing there in a pale green cloud of a suit. He was fair-skinned with a black mustache. I wasn't sure if he were an heir or not. I'd only seen a couple. But when he came in and squatted down and touched me, I knew. Malcolm, the stranger said, his voice deep. I'm Jeremy. How are you? He was at my level and a little hilarious. Besides the mustache, two very thick eyebrows made a big M at the top of his face. His dark hair was thick and short. He looked up at Lazarus. Oh my, where do you get these gems? Still fresh. Still wet from his bath. Delightful. Look at the bones. Look at the pretty lip. Returning to me, he added, ready for adventure? I nodded yes, though I wasn't sure. You have to speak, he said. Speak, boy, Lazarus commanded. Yes, I said, in my normal tone, but I saw they wanted more. So I took a deep breath and shouted, yes, adventure. I was eager to please. Oh my, Jeremy said with a grin that straightened his mustache. Lungs, very useful. Lazarus finally came out in front of his desk and stood quite close to me. I was thrilled to be so near him. He was a sort of father in my dreams, though I knew in truth I was fatherless. He leaned in for a moment, cleared his throat. I was about to get what my mate Ariel called the speech. Now, dear boy, so far you have been very brave, but there is more to endure. At times, the contrast between this place and the world of theirs will make you consider your life here one of suffering. The things you have to do to add to your trust may seem very hard. You will struggle, but the good news is you will have years, decades, and centuries to iron out any wrinkles, unbend any kinks. We have marvelous therapies for you once you're one of us. Intricate sublimes. We have implants, extracts, reprogramming, redescription. Everything that happens to you out there can be cured. I've done it. You can too. This is all prologue. This is all just your prologue. Prologue, I eventually decided, meant you weren't supposed to live now, so you could live later, when you deserved it. I have it here. Hope it's the right size, Jeremy said, bringing out a thin silver ring with a figure 8 lying on its side in the middle. This is your not yet collar. Some people say yet. It's short for not yet treated. It says you have a chance, so you're ahead of the rabble. He opened the clamp, put it around my neck, and closed it again. Then he threw back his head, so I saw his. It was a black, greenish line with a squiggle in the middle, digging into his Adam's apple. See? The same. When you're 20, you get a new one after boundary time. You dedicate, become confirmed. Then you're on your way, just like me. Lazarus hovered a few inches away. First day on the job. He stepped back so Jeremy could take my hand. As I was marched off, I distinctly remember wanting Lazarus to help me. And I already knew how very wrong it was to want such things. The last time I went to see my guardian was my idea, not his. I had worked all my life in the Sins at that point. I was lucky. I had a great trust. And I was getting ready for the boundary time. The first ceremony. But then I received my word my money was in escrow. Someone else had first claim on it. There was a lien, my money. The wealthy bank would only answer my queries by saying, ask your trust executor. I tried contacting Lazarus over and over. No word, no explanation. I had to go get an answer. I was living and working on the shore of the Sea of Pontchartrain then. Soon as I could, I hitched a ride to Audubon Island with a young fisherman named Syria from Chef Mentor Enclave. He had a single stop to make in Port Gramercy, and then we were headed across to the New Orleans Islands. 8 hours journey, I thought. I stood on the prow as we pulled away from the dock, touching my not yet cold. It was now as tarnished and tight as Jeremy's had been when I first met him so many years before. I was planning to get a new one, my last, very soon. There were transgressions that I would confess, things I promised to give up. In fact, in preparation, I was fasting. I was toting up my sins. I tried to tell myself I'd get the answers, that all would be put to right. I managed until we came to our first stop. There, I was thrown into jail over a simple conversation. And almost as soon as they let me go, the men came to kill me.